Okay, so welcome Arnaud and Dean from Weldon Flooring. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
A pleasure.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask you, first of all, what makes a good flooring?
Okay. Dean, you want to go first?
Of course, yes. Well,
It's a big question.
it is.
Yes.
There's a lot to cover.
Interesting
one. I think something which is often overlooked, and the best starting point, as obvious as it sounds, is what the timber floor is going on to, and we focus an awful lot on the subfloor and how that's constructed to make sure that the timber selection, the design, the pattern that you choose works within the building, within the room that it's going in.
And why is the subfloor so important?
Well, for example, because the timber, if you think a wood floor is a living, breathing material, and it will move and it will expand, and we need to manage that, and we need to allow for that movement. And if you understand what's going underneath it, then you can there's different techniques you can use to build from that floor, whether you've got underfloor heating, what the type of underfloor heating, whether it's the use of the room. It could be a gym with a sprung floor. It could have joists that we're sitting on. We could be onto a screeded base. All these things you need to consider when building your floor. To ensure that it looks as good as the day that it was installed for as long as possible.
And so you can limit the movement with that subfloor?
You can manage it, yes. Yeah, so with various perhaps different layers of cross-bonded ply, with detailing around the edge of the room, you can encourage the expansion and movement in the right places to prevent the components lifting between your parquet or boards.
Okay, and I guess that kind of brings me on to my next question, which is about, which we touched on a little bit earlier, which is always made me laugh when people talk about water damage, because, to my mind, I mean, a tree is, a natural outdoors, I don't know if we can call it a plant, but, but it, and I can't ever, I can never understand why water damage is such an important thing to consider when you're maintaining and caring for your wood floors, given that this has come from a tree that's lived outdoors and has been rained on many times.
Yes, I think the most important thing is to understand the reaction the wood will have in contact with the water.
Yeah.
When it's on a tree, you will not see it change of size with the rain, as you mentioned.
That's right.
But when you are talking about wooden floor, which is places in a room which has a certain size, and so you don't want it to expand too much, and when you have water, this is what will happen. The wood will expand, and if you don't have any joints at the edges of your floor, you will have your floor lift, and so the result of the water on the wood will be the expansion for the water. And another problem you can mention sometimes is underfloor heating system,
which also causes issues.
Different reaction, but it will damage the floor if you are not using that in a good way, in a good process.
And with underfloor heating is the concern that you've got to have the right kind of build up so that it doesn't then damage that wood flooring.
Exactly.
And you're talking about the joints around the room. So is that really an installation thing? So that's not necessarily the actual flooring itself, but how that flooring has been installed. So that makes a big difference to the potential water damage.
I will say not about the water damage itself. It's a need for the wooden floor to have an expansion gap on the edges of the room, except if you are in a very, very well controlled environmental controlled room, like in a museum, for example, or maybe in a wine room. Then you are 100% sure that the humidity, that the temperature will be exactly the same all years long.
Yeah.
And if you have that, the joints, the gap at the edge is not mandatory, but in a regular house, between the winter and the summer, you will not have the same humidity and temperature in your home.
Yeah.
So you need that gap to make sure that your floor is able to expand a little bit, and you will not see anything.
Yeah.
Maybe you can.
No, absolutely. You know, in time gone by, and that leads quite nicely. And we always used to be told, and you would be aware of the element of having to have timber acclimatise on site during the install process. So quite often, you'd be an installer would say it needs to arrive 2 weeks or a week before we're installing it on the floors. Now, what we do nowadays, in fact, is measure the relative humidity and the moisture content of the room that we're installing it in, and then we control the moisture content of the timber off-site in kilns, so it arrives on site the right condition for the floors of the room. So it improves the installation process. You don't have weeks of timber sat around on site during a busy construction, which makes life very difficult, and it means the timber is specifically at the right conditions for the room.
But even if that room changes in temperature, so I mean, even in my household, between me and my husband, the room temperature must change about 5 times a day, because he'll put it down and I'll put it up, and he'll put it down, and
Well, the key is gradual change as well, which is again why caution must be used always with underfloor heating systems. In that that change in temperature, if it's coming from if it's solely heated by the underfloor flooring system, then it should be very gradual. So we're talking 1 degree a day. Change of temperature.
We're going to have lots of floor damage in my household. Then.
It has to. Buying a timber floor is not something just to buy and forget about. You need to think about how you maintain it, how you look after it, and how you help it last.
Well, I guess that's probably the bringing us on to the most important question, which was the first thing I asked you when I saw you, which is, how does a normal person maintain their wood flooring?
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't, it's very, very difficult, because I know every flooring, of course, can be maintained in a slightly different way, but, how does the regular individual maintain their flooring? And it's not by clearly wiping it down with water and a mop.
Never water.
I will start, and then Dean, you could share with us your experience.
Yes.
Because you have a Weldon floor in your kitchen, so I think it should be very useful. Thanks for asking that question, because cleaning is one of the main problem we can have with people maintaining their floor. And we too often see people cleaning the floor with water. And so every project we do, every maintenance job we do, we are providing a training cleaning session. Because we advise on certain type of product you should use, and just a way of doing it. But don't be afraid of having a wooden floor. It's like it's not terrible. It's not. You don't have to cleaning it in a specific way, or having to take care of it very in a complicated way. I think it just, as for everything you love and you want to take care and keep it for long years, you just have to take care of it and make sure that you are using the right way. So maybe how you do with your kitchen.
Other generic products, I mean, I understand that there are specific cleaning products for specific woods. That makes complete sense. I mean, it's very difficult even for me to not want to clean my floors with wood and soap, and get it out, because that's the way that's for me what represents cleaning. But, and you, psychologically, I don't know whether it's just, you feel like you need to clean it with water and soap somehow.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, are there generic products that just everybody can use for flooring, even though there may be some that are better for some floorings and some better for others?
Yeah, the key things, I mean, let's assume we've got everything right, because we're talking about maintaining our floors as a subject. Now, the first point is obviously everything we've discussed previously. We've specified the right subfloor, we've built it correctly, we've allowed the expansion, we're doing everything right with the floors. Now we've moved on to the finish. So how do we look after the finish of the floor? And the key is what type of finish we have, whether we're looking at an oil finish, a wax finish, a lacquer finish, all these different types of finishes, and indeed their manufacturers will have different products that are best suited for maintaining and cleaning the floors. So, like you, I have timber floors at home. I use the manufacturer's product once a week, maybe twice a week. If it's holidays and the children are at home, then it's a spray-on soap which you spray onto the floor and wash off or wipe off with a cloth. That's your hygienic cleaning once or twice a week. And you're
never tempted with the soap and water?
No, of course not. I've seen too many finishes damaged. So that will maintain the finish to a level that you're happy with, and keeps it looking fresh and new. Now again, you may, depending on the type of finish, you may need to do an annual maintenance. Low maintenance. It's not, we're not talking about moving your furniture out and sort of heavy sanding, but it's from the manufacturer. Will have a maintenance oil or a maintenance finish. So again, for that, it's an annual service. It's you have a lotion almost that you put on the floor, and that just restores the finish again.
So it's annually.
So
and then an annual bigger clean.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a weekly clean.
And a weekly clean, yeah. And
without water.
But with no water. And are there, if you were not to go back and get the cleaning products from the manufacturer, are there, based on whether it's an oil floor or a waxed floor, are there products that you could go off and buy that are standard for waxed floors, etc.? Is there?
Wax is very different. Wax is very unique. Not many people nowadays will have a wax floor, because they take. If you have a wax floor, you have a wax floor, and you are spending every month you are doing a deep wax of it. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, they are the most beautiful floors that we do, and with antique timber, there is nothing like a wax floor. But you have to really be invested in what you're doing. It's
more complicated
absolutely
to maintain.
So in terms of if there's a generic product, I would always offer caution, and it's best to speak to the manufacturer, the supplier of your hardwood floor, and make sure you're using the right product that's recommended by them. Failing that, it's a case of trial by error in small unseeable areas, and see what it does to the finish.
Corners.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And can I ask you about? We were mentioning hardwood, and we were talking about this earlier, but, what is the real difference between, an original hardwood, maybe antique flooring, and, a fully timber wood floor and an engineered wood flooring, for example? Because to my mind, there's a clear price difference. But I can never, I've never really made up my mind about whether or not one is truly better than the other.
Okay, the main difference we can assess with the hardwood floor and engineered will be the top layer.
Okay.
So on a engineered, you will have a top layer of 3, 4, sometimes 5 millimeters.
Yeah. So
it means that if you want to sand it to restore the floor, you will be able to do it once, twice, and not more. With the hardwood, the top layer will be more, will be thicker,
yes,
and so you will be able to sand it more and to use it a long time.
So it's more about longevity,
yes,
than it is about, in reality, is one better quality than the other? I mean, presumably, if they're both timber,
it's both
the
timber
top is
on the top. Yeah.
Okay, so if you're thinking about, and in terms of longevity, what are the timelines? Are you talking about, so with an engineered flooring, are we talking about 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? What kind of length of time?
I mean, it very much depends on the use of the room, of course, and the finish. I'm afraid.
Says that.
I'm sorry, it's very boring.
We are working on projects where the house is. There is no one in the house for 1 year, and one day there is someone. So
I guess it also depends how they use it. If you're telling your kids to take off their shoes and everyone's in socks, then it's not as big a deal.
Exactly. Yeah.
But generally, is there a general? Can you assume that, for example, with an engineered flooring, it will last you 5 to 10 years?
More.
You would hope more. I think a decent engineered floor.
So if you're thinking about keeping your flooring for 10 years, then engineered.
It's more than enough.
It's more than enough. 10 years.
In all honesty, this question of solid versus engineered. Solid wood, 25 mil of solid oak boards are a thing of the past. Really, it's not something that you would do nowadays. We'd only generally do it in a grade listed building where it's a like-for-like replacement. The reason being, I mean, those floors initially were never meant as a finished floor. That was a subfloor effectively. That solid 20 mil sat across the joists, and then you would have a rug finish, generally with a painted edge or something, sort of Victorian style. But that solid 20 mil, it goes back, I'm afraid, rather boringly to sort of expansion of movement of the timber. The thicker that timber is, the more movement is pronounced, and that's why engineered was brought in to reduce that movement and to reduce that expansion.
Not to make it cheaper.
No, it's more stable.
I'm afraid it's
more
not
stable.
If you think about
so actually, engineered makes a lot more sense.
Yes.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So. Weldon, sorry to sort of plug the sort of company line slightly in terms of what we do, is we have a hybrid system in which we use plywood sheets which are installed across the room, and that gives us our cross bonding, our rigidity, our strength of an engineered system, and then we put 10 mil of solid oak onto that plywood base.
So we have both.
We have the
best
top
of layer, and both the subfloor is good. This is how we do.
And is that not, sorry to be asking, but is that not similar to what most companies would do, or is that quite unique?
It's quite unique. Most of the company will just buy an engineered floor. This is the same complex, but not with the same thickness and not done at the same place. We are doing on site to be able to change things, to manage the full process, and a regular flooring company will do it in a factory somewhere else. But it's the main complex. So you have 2 layers cross-bonded and the top layer. And the main thing
is cross-bonding, for those who don't know what that is, just so that
if you imagine you have 2 sheets, but in your mind think of 2 sheets of A4 paper. If you put them one on top of the other, then they're doing the same job. They're not performing as strong as they could. If you turn one to landscape and one to portrait, they're cross-bonded, so those joins never match up, and
it just makes it stronger.
Yes, this is why we say that engineered is more stable. Even if you have a water damage, an engineered floor, it will resist more of the expansion of the wood because of that cross-bonded sub-layer.
Okay, wow. And I guess, also importantly, you are very unique in the sense that you are a British company and made in Britain. So you tell me a little bit about your where you manufacture your specific wood.
So we are based in the UK. Our offices are in London, in South Kensington, and we are manufacturing our floor in our factory in Nottinghamshire.
Which is very unique, because I think many wood flooring companies don't manufacture in Britain.
Yes, I think most of them will buy some floor from Eastern Europe or Asia. We have a lot of manufacturers from Asia asking us to buy. It's impressive the production capacity they have and the price they offer, but it's not our market. It's not what we do. We are not doing a big surface every year, but our goal is to provide with the best quality, and for that we are relying on the expertise of our craftsmen at our workshop in Nottinghamshire and our installation team in London or abroad. I don't know if I forget something you want to add.
Very good. Yeah.
And that is quite important. I think we were earlier discussing sustainability, and again, this is always something that makes me smile, because you'd almost assume that wood flooring is sustainable because it's it comes from a tree, but you were explaining how actually there are timbers that are more sustainable than other timbers. So can you run through that a little bit with me?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's a common misconception that timber and use of timber flooring is not.
It's easier than concrete.
Yes,
it's
true.
easier than concrete.
It has a life. It's recyclable, renewable, and as long as you are using material which is well farmed and well managed, which of course Weldon do, then it's entirely sustainable, and done in the right way is entirely ethical, and that's something which we feel very strongly about, not just sort of the company values, but as part of our our raw warrants. It's a requirement of our raw warrants to have that view out on the materials that we use.
And what makes a particular timber unsustainable? So you were giving me a very interesting example of was it monkeys or apes?
Burmese teak.
Teak wood.
Teak wood, yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Tell me how teak wood is not as sustainable a product.
Well, Burmese teak, for example, is a very slow-growing timber, and it's and Myanmar, where its origins now, has seen lots of conflict over a teak which is known as the sort of king of hardwoods. It's very pliable, it's very usable, it's beautiful, it's a very popular timber.
It's perfect to use with water.
Perfect.
Yes,
Perfect.
excuse me, I forgot. It's very
The
resistant.
unsustainable one is the perfect one with water.
I'm afraid so. Your yacht decks across the world are furnished in teak. But it takes a long time to grow. So that traditional Burmese teak is no longer imported into the European Union, and it's not something which Weldon look to source and to use. Instead, we would look at alternatives. So there are sustainably managed plantation teak alternatives and forested alternatives to that. And sometimes we look further afield to African teak or Aroko, or lots of different exotic species which can achieve very similar aesthetics and performance.
But it's all about the management of the forest at the end.
Yeah.
This is what you want, is a well-managed forest.
Yeah, and interestingly, you were telling me that oak is a much easier product more sustainable product, I suppose.
It's faster growing.
Easier to come across and faster growing. I love oak personally, so I'm a happy customer. Tell me about the artwood floors that we were discussing earlier, because I hear that term a lot, and I'm not necessarily sure that everybody is very accustomed to what artwood floors actually are.
Well, I think in terms of marquetry and referring to the technique of using different species to create a pattern, a design. So I think we're very fortunate at Weldon, and that is one of our specialties, and we're something which we're well known for, rather than just sort of straight boards, parquet, or sort of paneling. We're well known for designing entirely unique patterns on your floor out of different species of timbers, almost put together and cut and put together like a jigsaw, where each species carries a different tone, and a picture is created effectively on the floor. So
the hardwood will be the top layer of that. It will be just what is made by the real timber. It's not the subfloor. It's not when you are the engineer, you have the top layer, as we said. And we have the sub-layer, which are not hardwood. The hardwood will be when you have one piece of timber. It's entirely one piece of timber. It's what we call the hardwood. But you have the same on the engineer with the top layer. It's also timber, but it's not called hardwood.
It's not called hardwood?
No. We have something...
That's right. Well, thank you very much. I think that has answered all of my questions.
Okay.
And thank you for coming.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.